10 seconds remaining. Microphone is on. Five, four, three, two, one.
Good morning, everyone. Michael Ferrara from D-Sport Magazine, and joining me here today is Doug from Hondata. Doug, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Mike. It's wonderful to be here.
Yes, definitely. Wonderful to have you here. Today, we are going to be talking about or answering any questions you guys might have about ECU solutions, Honda tuning, and doing all that properly. And Doug, tell us a little bit about the breadth of all the systems that you have. Which Hondas do you have a tuning solution for?
Well, pretty much everything from 1990 onwards that it's a performance-based Honda, we've got tuning solutions for. So we focus on what customers are interested in, which are the B series, the K series, and more up to date, the 1.5 and 2 litre turbo Honda. So we've got something for everything, but we're not static. We're always developing, we're always improving, we're always adding stuff, and maybe we might have time to talk about maybe some of the things that we've got planned for the next few months.
Yeah, that would be great. To give you guys an idea of what you can do, especially on the turbocharged engines, a lot more opportunity to make additional power. We want to first show you a test and tune of a Civic Type R that we used a Hondata tuning solution on, and we're going to come back and talk more and answer any questions you have about that.
Everyone, Basimir from D-Sport Magazine, and behind me is the 2018 Honda Civic Type R. We're going to be doing a test and tune. Doug from Hondata is going to be joining us a little bit later to test out the Flash Pro for the Honda Civic Type R, so check it out.
Hi, I'm Doug McMillan from Hondata, and I'm here at D-Sport today testing a 2018 Civic Type R. The first thing we're doing is to test with a stock calibration and see what sort of power and torque it makes, but we've also done some testing immediately after that, and we've put our 91 octane tuned reflash for the Civic Type R. The important things about the testing procedure is we need to keep everything nice and cool. We run a lot of cooling air, and we allow about 3 minutes worth of cooling between dyno runs. We don't just do our testing based off one dyno run, we do multiple dyno runs. In this case, we've taken 3 dyno runs and we've picked the best out of the 3, or the most consistent out of the 3. One of the really useful things about the Hondata Flash Pro software is the ability to data log. It's the ability to record all the sensors with all the values and what are they doing. When you first look at this, it's going to be really complicated. There's a lot of sensors, but you just pick one at a time. You look at temperatures, you look at pressures, and you learn what your engine is doing. If you want to learn, data logging is the way to do it. For example, let's just have a look at a few quick things here. The first thing will be boost. So we have a little graph down here of what our RPM and what our boost is as far as manifold absolute pressure. That's called MAP. We have many other things we can have a look at, so let's have a look at temperatures. So when we're dynoing, we try and keep our temperatures consistent. So we start the dyno run, in this case at about 75 Fahrenheit, intake air temperature into the filter, and about 104 in the charge pipe, and at the top end of the dyno run, it's very much the same. So that's telling us how well our intercooler is working, and are we getting a good supply of cool air to the engine. But probably most importantly of all is look for knock. So if we have a look at ignition timing, we have individual cylinder knock recording. So we can record the amount of knock happening on cylinders 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And if the engine is knocking, it's not tuned optimally. Either your fuel octane's too low, or the tuning you've been a little bit too aggressive. The goal is to tune it with the minimal amount of knock possible. But in tuning, and once you learn to work with Honda engines, you need, and you will end up understanding that more boost doesn't make more power. More boost makes more heat, and more heat makes more knock, and in many cases, more boost makes less power. So you use the data logging to understand the relationship between the temperatures, the boost pressure, the knock levels, and finding your way towards the maximum amount of safe, usable power. So we've done a baseline test with the Hondata Flash Pro 91 calibration. Now we've taken a look at exploring the different parameters you can change. We can change boost, we can change ignition, we can change air fuel. So let's go in. We've taken the air charge, which is effectively the amount of boost that we can put in, and we've upped that by 5%. Does that give us any more power? In fact, it doesn't. Our calibration is pretty well optimized for the boost level. So adding that 5% more boost has given us absolutely no more power. Okay, negative results are also good. So we took that same boost control parameter and we reduced the boost by 5% over stock. And as we expected, the power came down. All right, so what this tells us is that the boost curve we have programmed for the 91 octane calibration is pretty optimal. All right, let's try some other things. Let's take the ignition timing and subtract 2 degrees of ignition timing and run our dyno again. All right, 2 degrees timing lost us power all the way through. All right, so obviously taking timing out in this situation doesn't increase the power. So what about adding 2 degrees of ignition timing? Actually, this did gain us some power. From about 4,500 RPM to redline, we picked up 5 to 10 horsepower all the way through. Are we going to go onto the street with this? Not for this particular vehicle, no. Hondata has built some safety margin into their calibration. So if for whatever reason the fuel octane, the fuel filled up at the filling station is very low quality, you've got a little bit of margin for error there. But if you're the kind of owner who runs only the best octane, highest octane fuel, then you can have this calibration tuned for more horsepower should you wish. So the calibration is not at its limit. There is margin and there's safety. This is well tuned and well tested, and we road test, but also we track test. And we'll test these vehicles on the racetrack for 25 hours at a time and make sure our calibrations are good enough for our races.
Okay, welcome back. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And Instagram guys out there, I hope you're joining us right now. Welcome this morning. We are going to have a few giveaways, so please make sure you're paying attention. We've got a Harman Kardon Esquire Mini 2 to give away, and we also have a Citation 1 that we're going to be giving away. And just to mix it up a bit, we'll, for right now, Instagram, we've been only giving you the Mini 2s. This one's going to be a good one for Instagram. We're going to give you a Citation on here, a Citation 1 for Instagram, and Facebook and YouTube guys. We're going to give away 2 Esquire Mini 2s, so make sure you're paying attention because we will throw some quiz questions in there. So Doug, we've got an idea we kind of saw with that video, making horsepower with the tuning solution. How difficult is it to, take this thing out of the box, put it on the car, and get a calibration in there?
Look, we've made it as straightforward as we can. Making products simple is actually quite difficult, and it's taken many years worth of development to simplify the process and make it easy. So I'll start with something simple. How do you launch the software and select a calibration? So first thing for the newer model vehicles is we've got Flash Flow Manager. I'll fire that up, and we've got the ability to choose a new calibration, or we can choose from a whole variety of different calibrations, different models. So at the moment I'm going to be choosing the Civic Type R because that's what we've been focusing on. And of course we've got Civic Type R models from all around the world. I'm just going to choose the US one. So a couple of pop-up menus, fairly straightforward to go through. And we've just put in the latest release version of the software a calibration wizard. So we can choose a bunch of bolt-ons. So do we have flex fuel? Yes. Right. What octane are we running? 93 if we're somewhere outside of California, and charge pipes, intakes, front pipes, back pipes, and turbos as well. So we can see, in this case, we might have upgraded with a full race turbo. Okay. All right. So we can choose all of those, or we can select a pre-done calibration, and we've probably got somewhere in the order of about 20 or 30 pre-tuned calibrations that you can choose from. So there's a lot of selection there that's pretty easy to choose. So I'll choose this Civic Type R calibration, okay, and then it comes up with a list of modifications. Now, one of the things that we've just done the video on and we've been focusing on is our fuel system upgrade, which we released a little while ago. So if we want to prepare the engine computer for the fuel system upgrade, it's choose Hondata fuel system, OK, and then we just press the upload button, upload to the ECU, and having prepared that upload to the ECU and installed the fuel system on your vehicle, you're ready to go for increased power and torque.
So who needs this? You know, I know we made some pretty decent gains without upgrading the fuel system, but the fuel system is kind of one of the limiting factors on the Type R, is it not?
It absolutely is. Now, this of course we start going into Honda's philosophy. The fuel pump on the direct injection fuel pump on the Civic Type R is the smallest fuel pump of all of Honda's available engines. And this unfortunately is because I think it was developed in Germany. The fuel pump is a Bosch fuel pump, so we put on a bigger fuel pump. So who needs this? Anyone who wants to make more power. Now, because Honda run a small fuel pump on the Civic Type R, we've put on and we've developed an upgrade for a bigger direct injection fuel pump and a bigger in-tank fuel pump, which is ethanol rated. So we're able to get around 24% more fuel flow from this direct injection fuel pump. And to go with that, we have and we need bigger injectors as well. So
I'll get the last one out of the box.
You'll get
here.
the last one out of the box. So the fuel system, we call it a system. It's not just a fuel pump because it's got about 5 different parts to it. Injectors, low pressure pump, high pressure pump, low pressure fuel lines, and hidden under there, Mike, we've got a high pressure fuel line under that piece of plastic there.
Oh yeah, there we go.
We have a high pressure fuel line as well, and all of these things are limiting factors to making more power. So if you're going to make substantially more than 400 horsepower, or that's your goal, you're going to need this. So Honda, because of their small fuel pump on stock Civic Type R, have limited the boost around 3,000 to 4,000 RPM because Honda's direct injection fuel pump on the Civic Type R can't supply enough fuel. So with this fuel system on even a stock Civic Type R, we're able to increase the mid-range torque between 3,000 and 4,000 RPM and up the boost from about 23 to about 28 PSI. So the mid-range on this, doing nothing else, is significantly improved. We're making much better use of the existing turbo that's on the Civic Type R.
We have a question out there.
Can you run any level of ethanol with this?
We have run up to 85% ethanol on this. However, the testing that we've done, the sweet spot for maximum power is between 40 and 50% ethanol. So that is what we recommend people to run on. You can run E85, but as you get to higher ethanol levels, we've got to reduce the boost to reduce the load on the fuel system somewhat, because you're getting right to the limit of the fuel system with E85 on the Hondata fuel system upgrade. You can do it, but your sweet spot for power and torque is E40 to E50.
Well, and the nice thing about E40 to E50 also is you're going to get some extended range out of the vehicle too. If you go straight E85, you know, you're losing 40% of your mileage.
Yeah.
At you know, E45 or something like that, you're closer to only losing about 20%. So
Yeah.
it is that sweet spot where the advantages you're getting from the fuel and the additional cooling and all that good stuff and, you know, happening, it does add a little bit as you go from E45 to E85, but it's minimal compared to what you're trading off.
Mike, I know that we're talking a lot of technical data here, but I'd like to simplify it for people who might think, oh, running E40 or E50 is quite hard to do. It's not. It's a simple ratio. When you go to fill up, if you want E50, you do 5 gallons of E85 and 4 gallons of pump gas. If you want E40, you do 5 gallons of pump gas and 4 gallons of E85. So it's simply a 4 to 5 ratio. And that's how you get your E40 or your E50. Simple. If you can remember 2 numbers, 4 and 5, you can get the exact ratio you need for maximum power and range.
Very good. Oh, question.
Does the Type R have injectors for the valves as well?
Does the Type R have injectors for?
I think-
Before the valve.
I think they're asking, does it have a port fuel injection in addition to the
Oh,
direct?
no. The injection system for the Type R is 4 direct injectors. That's it. And Honda are pretty smart with their cam control, so that they provide enough overlap so that some of the fuel gets washed back into the intake and it washes the back of the intake valve. So I've not seen on any of the engines that have done any large number of miles a necessity to have port injection.
Now, port injection, if you're going beyond this level, let's say you want to put together a Type R engine and make 550, 650 horsepower. Is there a way to integrate the port fuel injection on top of this, or is this kind of separate?
Port fuel injection is separate, but you're asking, what if you want to make 550
Okay,
horsepower?
yes.
That's exactly what we were doing just a couple of days ago.
Oh, okay.
So it's R&D, we're still working on it, and this is the future of some of the products we're working on, how you can make more power above 500 horsepower without having to go to the complexity of port fuel injection, which requires separate fueling systems, separate management for it. It's not simple, so we try and keep things simple, and we're trying to do it with stock components in the vehicle or just slight modifications without any significant changes to plumbing.
Now, yeah, go ahead, question.
So how long is this install process, and do I need a professional or shop to do it?
Should we ask Sam? Because Sam did it. Well, we did one here, and it was our first time kind of doing it. The first time, it's definitely something. I think if you're a do-it-yourselfer, start on Saturday, have Sunday open just in case. But if you're good, you'll be done on Saturday. I think is it as a installer, if you own a shop or something like that. I think after you install the first system, you could probably get it down to about a 3 or 4 hour window of getting everything in there.
Yeah, 3 to 4 hours after you've done it once, and if you've got a little bit of mechanical ability, is within the realm of feasibility. If you're doing it for yourself for the first time, make sure you have someone who can help mechanically, and plan for at least a day.
Yeah, plan for it. Yeah, go ahead.
Any carbon buildup problems?
Well, that's what Doug was just talking about. A lot of times on direct injection engines, as we talked about before in the magazine, intake valve deposit accumulation is something that occurs. And a lot of the European models that only have direct fuel injection, we've seen that firsthand with a VW 1.8 liter engine coming in here and just being doused, or not doused, but just built up all over the place with the intake valve deposits. What Doug was saying earlier is that Honda's cam timing is such that they do a good job of helping some of that fuel come back up into the back of the intake valve and keep things clean.
Yes.
So.
And I've looked at some of Honda's test engines that have done 50, 60, 70, 100,000 miles and observed the back of the intake valves on those engines, and there's no significant carbon buildup. A little bit, of course, as always, but nothing that is going to close or significantly close the intake ports, which I have seen on some other European engines.
Yes.
How much power is expected with a custom tune with this system?
Well, that's how long is a piece of string, because a custom tune, it also depends on the bolt-ons that you have on the vehicle. For example, have you upgraded the intake? Have you upgraded the downpipe? Have you upgraded the turbo? So I would probably have to defer to you, because you've done some of this on a fuel system, so you'll know, and you did a custom tune on the Civic Type R with the fuel system.
I did. It was my first time working with the software. I'm familiar with a lot of the other platforms of the software packages out for some of the popular systems. And this was the first time using this, and very easy to use, number one. And in a matter of keystrokes, I believe we got an additional, maybe close to an additional 5% over the original supplied calibration. Now that can vary depending on what your threshold and how close you want to push things to the edge. But basically, we pushed it a little bit harder. It ran it a little bit leaner than the base map did, and or the not the base map, but the calibrations provided did. and it was really easy to use and can get some additional horsepower out of it. Because everybody's parts are a little bit different, if you have the opportunity to get the system, you know, checked, even just a check dyno to make sure everything's working well at a local tuner, it's always a great idea. And if you have one that's proficient in tuning, they can actually probably get you some additional horsepower by tailoring it for your exact specific mix of parts.
Mike, you said 5%. I think our viewers want to know an actual number for horsepower.
Oh!
Can you remember how much extra horsepower you got?
I thought it. You guys remember? I thought it was about. Oh wait, here we go. Let me see here. All right, so our D Sport tune, we ended up with about 20 extra horsepower, 20 extra peak horsepower over what there was before. Yeah, so.
And that's your custom tune.
That was our.
That's
our
a D Sport first time.
Yes,
first
D
time
Sport custom tune, which encompassed about 3 or 4 pulls on the dyno. It was pretty quick. Yes.
Will we see a fuel system upgrade like this for the 2018 plus to 2-liter turbo Accords?
I own a 2-liter Accord, and it is very, very dear to my heart, and I know what some of its limitations are, and I would be fair to say I would very much like to see something like this, and because I have the Accord, I'm the person to develop this, and I am working on something. But I can't tell you exactly what because we haven't got to that final point yet. So yes, I'd love to see something for the Accord, but I'd like to know what kind of Accord you're driving. Is it the 1.5 litre? Is it the 2 litre? Because the 2-liter Accord block and head is so close to that of a Civic Type R, and it's got a lot of potential. But in the testing that I've done, yes, we run out of fuel on that. When I've upgraded my Accord with a Civic Type R turbo, which is a lot of fun, and I put flex fuel onto it, it was running out of fuel. So I know for my own car that it needs more fuel.
Go ahead.
Why don't you sell high pressure fuel pumps alone, like by itself?
Because, as I've said earlier, this is an entire system. The high pressure fuel pump on its own will not do the job, okay? Because you need a high pressure fuel line, because the stock fuel line restricts to around 400 horsepower. Okay, once you get over 400 horsepower, we have this fuel line built from scratch to provide the additional fuel volume needed for over 400 horsepower. And the fuel injectors, there's no point providing extra fuel unless you've got fuel injectors to go with it as well. So the fuel injectors, every part of the harness in place. This is the start of the journey to getting even more horsepower. Once you've got this in place, you've got the ability to go a lot further. But these are the parts: the low pressure pump, the high pressure pump, the low pressure line, the high pressure line. And this low pressure line, it might look very simple, but this took months and months to develop because it's a straight bolt on. You can put it in, everything lines up, it just bolts in. And the nice thing about our fuel system upgrade is you can return it completely to stock. So when you sell the car, you can take all the parts off, put all the stock parts back on, nothing is cut, nothing is drilled, it goes back to stock.
Yeah, in fact, in the installation, the most difficult challenge, I think, Sam can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was basically just getting the factory direct injectors out of the block. I mean, those were the ones that were seemed to give us the most trouble, and we got a little creative with the tool to get it out, but we were able to get it out without damaging the injector. So in the future, like Doug was saying, selling the car, putting it back to stock is very simple to do. Yes.
So a little off topic, but in your opinion, Doug, what do you think is the best bang for your buck, the Type R or the Civic Si?
What do I think is the best bang for the buck, did you say?
Yes.
The Type R is a much stronger engine, okay? It has a lot more potential in terms of turbo bolt-ons, power, things like that. It is a little bit more expensive, but the Civic Si is close to our heart, and at the moment we're doing a very extensive bolt-on for the base model Civic, which is the non-Civic Si, and we're getting power levels out of the base Civic now equal to or even better than that of the Civic Si with updated software and with updated bolt-ons. We're going through pretty much every bolt-on you can do for the base model Civic, because outside of the US the Civic Si doesn't exist. So we're looking into everything that we can do for the base model Civic, and expect to see a lot of information come out on that either later in the year or early next year. And if D-Sport's interested, we can cover that in some great detail. So the SI has a lot of potential, but the stronger engine is the Type R. And I'd just like to dispel an old wives' tale that you can only get so much torque out of a Civic Type R. We've heard people who have said, oh, you can only get 400 pound of torque out of it before you start bending rods and things like that. Therefore, you can only go so far with it. And we've been running our own Civic Type R for 18 months at 470 pound-feet of torque as a daily driver. So, no, it's an old wives' tale from people who don't have the data and who haven't done the tuning and testing.
You know, I think one of the big challenges with you know, the new Honda platforms for tuners is people, you know, tuners aren't familiar with direct injection. It's a whole new set of rules. You know, if you try to run the same timing and fuel strategy that you run with a port fuel injection engine, it's going to be completely off the charts from where you need to be.
Yes.
So what, you know, without giving away too much, I mean, I know you did a lot of tuning and stuff with Honda for some of the cars that were actually racing. And
Yes.
the 25 hours at Thunderhill, was that it?
2 years worth of racing, 2 Civic Type Rs.
And what can you tell us about a direct injection tune versus a port fuel injection tune?
With a direct injection tune, you can run them a little bit leaner. So when I tuned for the Civic 25R vehicles, I actually tuned them to run leaner for fuel economy, because power wasn't essential. It was handling. Yes, power was important, and I leaned it out, and I was able to take the air-fuel ratio from 12 to 1 up to 13.2 to 1, which is, as far as the previous generation K-Series, people go, that's lean, it's going to blow the engines up. We ran 2 of these vehicles at 13.2 air-fuel ratio for 2 years, and the engines at the end of them were brand new. But because we ran them lean, the fuel economy was so much better, we saved, for each event, 2 pit stops, and that was 5 to 10 minutes worth of track time. So it's strategy. So the direct injection engines seem to be able to handle a slightly leaner air-fuel ratio. They're more tolerant of that. And I'll segue into the next segment of direct injection. When we first started with it, we had no idea what we were dealing with and how it worked, and we just learned as we went along the way. But what I have learned is that direct injection and flex fuel is magic. When you're injecting high ethanol content fuels into a cylinder, it's like an in-cylinder intercooler. So as you're injecting a high content of ethanol, as the ethanol droplets evaporate, they'll cool the intake charge, and so your charge is being cooled in the cylinder, and we can make a lot more power by being more aggressive in the tuning with high content ethanol. And so it's magic. Now it's really good.
Yes.
So I have quite a few questions here.
Quite a few.
So one of them is,
I'll talk fast.
is this something that could benefit Civic Sports with CVT, or is the CVT not able to handle too much power?
All right, bit of background here. The 1.5 Honda engine, turbo engine, the Civic Sport for example, can make more power than any of Honda's V6 engines. They can make a lot of torque, okay? And a CVT consists of metal stainless steel belt and some stainless steel cones. So there is a torque limit to how much you can put through CVTs. So when we're doing CVT calibrations, we limit them to around 260 pound-feet of torque. Out of the factory, they come out with about 205 pound-feet of torque. So the limitation really is dependent on how well it's tuned. Try not to make the torque curve too spiky, and also the driver. The biggest problem we see with CVTs is not the CVT so much as it's the driver.
Okay.
And you get people who will throttle brake and give full brake at a traffic light, full throttle, and they'll burn up the CVT at a standstill.
Gotcha.
So the biggest problems we see are driving. But for our own purpose, we've run 30,000 miles on a CVT running flex fuel at a fairly high torque ratio. So to a good extent, it depends on the driver as well. CVTs, used ones, are pretty inexpensive to get these days. It's down to the driver, the tuner, and what you feel comfortable with.
Okay, next question is, you mentioned Honda's DI engines do a good job at mitigating carbon buildup. Do you feel an oil catch can for these K20C engines is beneficial at all?
I can't answer that because I can't say it is or isn't beneficial because I haven't done a study of that to find out what and why there'd be a benefit. So that's I can't answer that, sorry.
Okay. And then this one's not a question, but it's shame we don't have the Type R in Brazil. Would be interesting to see the gains from E100 like we saw with the 1.5T engines.
Wow, Brazil is a good place for flex fuel because the standard fuel in Brazil I think is up to around about 25%, 27% ethanol. So you could make some big gains on the Brazilian vehicles as compared to the US E10. Yeah, well, you need to talk to your importers in Brazil, but I happen to know that the Brazilian import tax on vehicles is fairly high. So you're pretty much doubling the price of a vehicle from the US to get it into Brazil.
Ah, gotcha.
But Honda do have an assembly plant in Brazil.
Okay.
So they build 1.5s there, and of course you can make a lot of power out of them already. So there's off-the-shelf maps, and the ethanol, you could run them on much higher content ethanol for Brazil and make a ton more power.
Very good. Go ahead.
So on the Civic Si, at what point do you need to, what power level do you need to upgrade the clutch at?
Back to basic engines, it's not power, it's torque. Torque is the twisting force, okay? Power is simply torque multiplied by RPM. So, from our own test purposes and our own dyno, which is close to flywheel torque, so I'll give you the flywheel torque numbers that we found the clutch starts slipping, around about 260 to 280 pound-feet of torque. That can also depend on how you drive it. Now, if you're someone who tends to ride the clutch and you've worn it a little bit, it can be even lower than that. I've seen a brand new Civic Si and the clutch was slipping. Stock. And that's because the owner had transitioned from an automatic vehicle and is not used to the clutch and had worn the clutch slightly. So for our own vehicles, when we're dynoing, when we're getting up in the high 200 range for torque, we will put a bigger, stronger clutch in.
Okay, very good. So we've got the a lot of Civic Type R questions out there. A lot of questions also about the 1.5 liter turbo. What is going on with some of the development? You said you wanted to mention something about some of the things you guys are doing in the background. What are some of those?
I'll go into a little bit further with the base model Civic, the 1.5, because the Civic Si is specific to the US, but for the rest of the world, it's the base model Civic 1.5. And we're in the middle of a series of bolt-on tuning for the base model Civic, and we're getting power levels out of the base Civic now which